Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of hashtag BKOT. It's very exciting. And today we want to talk about insight into the profession as a whole, right? And the profession is not looked at in the most positive of light nowadays. And the folks over at the AICPA are driving initiatives to help correct this. And we're going to talk about it today. So with us is Carl Mays, Associate Director over at the AICPA for CPA Quality and Evolution. Carl, thank you for taking time out today to do this. Very excited. So please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Chris. So like you said, I work at the AICPA and I work on enhancing audit quality for the AICPA. I also historically have worked on CPA Evolution, which is an initiative that I think for a lot of our audience here is going to be of great interest. So looking forward to talking about that today.
For those who may not know, talk about this CPA evolution. What's driving it, and what are the plans for it?
Yeah, so we started back in 2017. The AICPA and NASBA, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, and we started thinking about, do we have the right licensure model? And that's really what CPA Evolution is about, is, do we have the right model? And we were seeing a handful of trends at the time. So some of these trends have continued to today. Declines in hiring of accounting graduates. So we're seeing public accounting firms hiring. We did a study back in April earlier this year. I think it was 57% of all hires were accounting graduates, 43% were non-accounting, and that's really high, compared to historical norms. And some of that's driven by growth and advisory, but some of it also is driven by the performance of engagements that are new to the profession that require different skill sets. So we see things like system and organization control engagements, SOC engagements. They used to be called service organization control engagements, and that's changed. But these are engagements that are performed under a CPA, where the CPA has to sign off on the engagement at the end of the day, and they're focused on digging in and testing the operating effectiveness of controls. But what we're seeing a lot of firms do is they're bringing in, for example, MIS majors, people with deep systems knowledge to perform those engagements. And many of those folks, we reach out to those folks and we hear CPA isn't really the direction that I plan to go in my career. So obviously, especially with things like those SOC engagements where only we can do them, we want to make sure that we have a pipeline of CPAs that are coming into the profession with the competencies that are necessary to do those jobs.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the decline in hiring of graduates, and in speaking with clients on a day-to-day basis, especially in smaller towns, there's a few schools out there, and they used to have a big pipeline of interns and candidates coming in, and now there's more competition as folks are looking for staff all over the place. So with the work out there and the firms needing staff more than ever, why do you think that there's been a decline in general?
So I think it's a good question. I think there's a number of different answers to that. I don't think it's an easy question to answer. But I think some of it is demographics. There has been a general decline, and I want to say several million fewer undergraduate students over the past few years since 2020. And what we're hearing through surveys and McKinsey reports and so on is many of these students just aren't seeing the value in college that historically they've seen. So if overall undergraduate enrollment goes down, accounting enrollment goes down. But I also think part of it is branding. You mentioned earlier on, what's the appeal of the accounting profession, and being an accountant, I think we have a tremendously appealing profession, but it's just a matter of getting some of that out there. And that's one of the things that we were thinking about as we built the new licensure model through CPA Evolution.
Yeah, no, let's talk more on that. How is this new model going to position the profession for the future?
Yeah, so when we did our outreach, like I said, we started in 2017 and we did, maybe 2 years of extensive outreach around CPA Evolution. We talked to about 4,000 people. We had over 40 discussion groups from large firms, small firms, regulatory community, academics, and students, of course, and candidates. And what we heard was a handful of trends and a handful of themes. So the first thing was our body of knowledge is dramatically larger than really it has ever been before. So the Internal Revenue Code has tripled since 1980. There's 4 times as many accounting standards, 5 times as many auditing standards. So that's a lot to know. At the same time, we're hearing that the skills that are required of newly licensed CPAs have changed. In some cases, I personally, when I came out, I was an auditor, and I could spend several hours just footing massive reports that came out of the client's system. People don't really have to do that anymore. I mean, technology has kind of disrupted that whole thing. And even from a confirmation perspective, when we do accounts receivable, we do confirmations, right? Or cash confirmations. We always did paper confirmations. So I physically printed off a piece of paper and I wrote in, this is the amount, and I wrote in the address of whoever we were sending it to and put it in an envelope. And now they have bots, right, that can do the entire confirmation process. You just give it a list of your outstanding receivables and their balances and your threshold, and it'll make a selection. It will reach out to those people over and over again until they respond. It will take those results, extrapolate, and then print off a nice little report. So it's a different world. And what it means when those types of procedures are being offshored or automated or being done by paraprofessionals, it means that the on-ramp is shorter than ever for newly licensed CPAs. It means that we need more professional skepticism, more critical thinking skills, et cetera. So, in total, we have a significantly larger body of knowledge. We've got a shorter on-ramp to the profession. But despite that increase in breadth, the exam has stayed the same size. And that's really what we were kind of wrangling with is, do we smash more stuff, systems oriented stuff, data oriented stuff that's really pretty interesting. And some of the most interesting stuff we do as accountants, do we just try to cram it all into the same exam and make it a mile wide and an inch deep? And we felt like, that wasn't the right solution. Do we increase the size of the exam from 16 hours, maybe it's 24 hours, and we add additional sections? Well, that's a barrier to entry, and we didn't want to do that. So ultimately, where we landed after all that discussion and after a lot of deliberation was a core plus disciplines model for CPA. And that's ultimately what CPA Evolution has become synonymous with, is that core plus disciplines model.
Now, when so over the last 5 years, I've been working on this and positioning this this change, and so it couldn't come at a better time because, yeah, you're right. As far as it's not about, that's what the folks here to be an accountant, they're like, oh, it's just data input and tax season and long hours, and and it's not anymore because of the folks embracing technology and utilizing that. So more than ever are the unique skills, technical skills, even soft skills that folks need to know to work with a firm. And then now you have the whole remote virtual model in here too. So a lot is going on. So within the exam, or are there any other so if a graduate or a candidate is looking, are there any skill set courses or anything they can take through you guys to see if it's like a good fit for their career?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So obviously we can't, by law and regulation, we can't prepare people for the CPA exam. But we can collaborate with universities, and that's really the route that we've taken. That core plus disciplines approach, we have a common core that everybody would have to take, and then we have 3 disciplines, and one of those focuses on business analysis and reporting. One of them focuses on systems, information systems and controls, and then one focuses on tax compliance and planning, including financial planning. And what we've done is we've tried to collaborate with the educational community, the academic community, to integrate those types of concepts into their curricula more so than they have been in the past.
And so that seems to be core plus discipline model. That seems to be the biggest change going on. And so what this could mean for can you talk about what this could mean for the candidate themselves and also for the everyday accounting firm?
Yeah, so from a candidate, I think the important thing to know in terms of the exam, so 2 different parts of it. One is education. Education, obviously, we can't set the educational requirements, but we can make recommendations through what's called the UAA, the Uniform Accountancy Act. And we have made recommendations that everybody adopt a core plus disciplines model that's consistent with what the exam is going to require. With respect to the exam is still going to be 16 hours, so no change in the number of hours. You still have to pass 4 sections, so no change in the number of sections you have to pass. You'll have 3 core sections and then 3 discipline sections, but you only have to pass 1 of the discipline sections, so it's a 3+1, right, model. The core is audit, financial accounting and reporting, and tax and regulation. So that's the core. And then BEC, which exists today, right? So anybody who's not in that pipeline, BEC is the business and economics concepts section of the exam. That section goes away. So the content associated with that section funnels into some of those disciplines and into the audit section. And then you have the 3 disciplines, and the 3 disciplines are business analysis and reporting. And when you think about that one, you're talking about advanced accounting, you're talking about governmental accounting, business analysis, data analysis, those types of things. It's a logical follow-on to financial accounting and reporting that's in the core. Then you have tax compliance and planning. So you're thinking about going into the tax space when you get out of school. That's a logical direction for you to go in terms of your discipline selection. It covers tax compliance and planning, but it also covers financial planning. So things like retirement accounts, other things like that, because they've become so intertwined in practice. And that's a logical follow-on for reg. And then, the last one is information systems and controls. And that one, from my perspective, is the biggest change, the most different from what historically we've offered on the exam. And that covers information systems, it covers data management, covers information security and confidentiality and privacy, and then those SOC engagements that we talked about before, and gives you a deep dive into some of those things. So I think the way for the candidate to think about it is, I still have to effectively take 3 of the sections that existed before. There's a little bit of difference between the 2, and we can talk about some of that. But then instead of BEC, I get to pick one area to do a deep dive into something that I'm really interested in working in. So that's kind of the concept.
Yeah. And so did the pandemic impact this process at all? Did it hit the gas pedal for it? Did it make it easier? Did it have no effect at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I'll tell you, when the pandemic started, we had already gotten approval for proceeding with it, and that was definitely a question that we wrestled with: is this going to change our timeline? And ultimately, we concluded, so many of the things that we had to do could be done from a virtual perspective, that it really didn't. It didn't affect the timeline at all. We had always kind of anticipated it would take several years to get the new exam exposed, to give everybody time to develop materials so that people could prep for the exam, and then to launch that exam. And our timeline really didn't change when the pandemic struck.
So back to the you mentioned focusing on universities, and I think that's something that like a grassroots almost. When I speak with firms, there is literally 1 out of 100 who are doing anything on a local level, right? As far as getting the word out there about the profession in general. Do you think, well, one, are there any type of plans in place to kind of push the CPA evolution out there? And what can firms do on a local level to get involved and we're trying to recruit more folks into this profession? Can you share some thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think CPA Evolution is a great opportunity, and I'll just tell you, great opportunity for recruitment. We polled candidates before we went forward with anything, and we kind of said, I'm going to say it was maybe 600, accounting students, and then we polled another 200 or so non-accounting students. And we said, if this was the way CPA licensure worked, how would it affect your interest in becoming a CPA? And it was over 80% of all students said this either increases my interest or it keeps me at maximum interest in becoming a CPA. So the number that said it decreases their interest was maybe like 5 to 10%. So really solid, good response from students. And I think it is an opportunity for us as a profession collectively to go out and say, look, we don't wear green visors anymore. We don't have 10 keys. I had a 10 key when I started. We don't have 10 keys anymore. Most of us,
Oh,
right? We don't use the green bar paper. We actually do systems work. We actually do data analytics work. And,
yeah.
this exam is kind of reflective of that. And what we've heard from, again, over 80% of all schools is that they're changing their curriculum or their curricula to reflect some of the things that are, in this exam. A lot of schools want to prepare their students in case they want to pursue CPA. So students who haven't chosen a major yet, great selling point for those kids in that principles class. They have to take principles of accounting. It's a great opportunity for the faculty to kind of sell the profession. Look, we're in all the things that you're most interested in, that MIS major, that business analytics major. You could pair those with accounting and there's a route to CPA for you. So I think from an academic and from a get the word out perspective, we at the AICPA certainly have initiatives that are going to be focused around that over the coming year. And we've been, doing that type of work since the onset of CPA Evolution. But from a firm perspective, encourage the firms to get out there and stump. Get out there and get on their academic, committees for the schools that they recruit from, and encourage those schools to adjust their curricula to reflect some of the things that we'll be testing on. We asked hiring directors from firms with over 11 CPAs, if a school was to set up their curriculum to produce a candidate who has this type of knowledge, what we talked about, they would have that core knowledge in audit, accounting and tax and regulation, but then they would do a deep dive into systems or a deep dive into analytics, et cetera. How would that impact your decision making? And what the hiring directors told us, 83% said a student who came out of that program would be more valuable, hiring would increase of those students or both. So that's a pretty, good number, I think, for us to be conveying to those academic institutions and encouraging them to revise their offerings.
Yeah, spot on. And that's important because they need to have awareness of this. And so, the profession during the pandemic was deemed essential, right? And so, but then you couldn't go to an office. So it's like, all right, what do we do? And you had to adopt strategies and concepts and everything has been around. Remote work is internet started, remote work started, but I don't think the profession grasped onto that right away. But when they were forced into it, made everyone realize that, hey, we can do this. Everything's fine. There's this cloud technology. We've been apprehensive. Let's do this. And the profession and the work's out there. I mean, it's unbelievable. But with the staff, we need staff. And in order to get started, there has to be awareness. So I think that the profession as a whole has move towards changing faster than ever, which is not usually the case. And so it'll get to a point where the profession will be looked at in a much more positive light. And so I think that on a firm level, that it's important to all firms, not 1 out of 100, to do some type of recruitment efforts. And so you need to have get the awareness out there for sure. So, what are the next steps for CPA Evolution over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, so important dates that I'd encourage everybody to have in mind. So we already did the exposure of the new exam blueprint, which kind of lays out all the concepts that we would test. January of 23, that blueprint will be final and it'll be posted. So, everybody can see the things that are going to be on the new exam. You can still see the exposure draft if you're curious, and see the things that we're likely to test. And then it'll be launched in January of 2024. So that's the launch date for the new exam. The biggest question, Chris, or I mean, certainly the most common question that I get when I'm talking with candidates is, what does that mean from a transition perspective? So what if I pass one section of the exam and now it's January of 2024? Do I lose credit for that section of the exam? I just want to make sure we cover that because we get that question so often. And, it, I think it could not be easier. I can tell you we looked at all kinds of different options for transition. I think this is the cleanest. So we have an audit section of the old exam, audit section of the new exam. If you pass audit, you get audit, right? So you keep credit for audit on the new exam. If you pass FAR on the old exam, you get FAR on the new exam. Reg on the old exam, you get reg on the new exam. The only thing that's a little different is BEC, because BEC goes away. So if you pass BEC on the old exam, you do not have to take a discipline. If you don't pass BEC on the old exam, you do have to take a discipline, and that's really how it works. I mean, no real change in terms of it. You're still going to have a time window within which to complete the exam, just like you've always had, and so on. So you don't have, permanent credit. You're still going to have that time window. But I just recommend for candidates who are in that position, or for firms out there and you have staff who may be in that position, encourage them to complete the exam as soon as possible. That's always our recommendation. Life gets in the way. I personally have taken, I think it was reg, I took it in the middle of busy season. That was brutal. So encourage everybody to get that exam done as soon as they can. And if not, if you're not going to be able to complete all 4 sections, the way to think about it from my perspective, so current audit is a little bit less in depth than the future audit exam. And if you go in, you can kind of compare the two blueprints. The new audit exam is going to have some additional stuff on systems and so on. Financial accounting on the new exam is going to have less complex accounting than the current FAR exam. The new reg exam is going to have less complex tax stuff than the current reg exam. And then with BEC, you just got to decide, do I want to go with the known quantity, which is, everybody knows what it is, or do I want to do a deep dive into my area of interest, like with ISC or BAR, and that's going to be, everybody will make their call on that.
It's quite obvious you are very passionate about serving the CPA profession, and it's awesome. So were you always wanting to be a CPA since a kid, or can you share a little bit about Carl and kind of how you got into this profession?
Yeah, so I was absolutely not. But I can tell you, so, I went to school. I was, at one point, I was a double major and I was finance and accounting. And it was going into my senior year, do I want to take an internship at a, investment place, or do I want to take an internship at a firm? And the firm was just more interesting to me. And once I got into audit, I was an auditor in practice. I really am. I'm very passionate about the importance of audit to society. We are the gatekeepers for the capital market. There is not a more important position in the financial world, in my role, or in my mind, than the position that we fill. So you combine kind of the cool stuff that we're doing around systems and analytics with the public interest that we serve through our role. I think it's a great time to be a CPA.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, this and I didn't know this was going on until till today. I saw myself. I learned quite a bit, and this is awesome to hear because change is constant. It's a matter of when, not if, and so things are and it changes always for the good. You can love it or hate it. You got to embrace it. from our conversation today, this is something that, and it's rolling out right away over the next year or so. So before we wrap up, though, any final thoughts you'd like to share for our audience today?
The January 24 date is the one to kind of key in on. And if you have additional questions, I mean, there's lots and lots of information out there. I'd suggest you go to evolutionofcpa.org for the latest.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time, Carl, today. It's a joy speaking with you, getting to know you and what you do. And so for everyone, we'll be back shortly with another episode. And thanks for listening in. For now, take care. Bye-bye.